Hi, welcome to Infusion Health, the podcast. I'm comedian Chris Patrick, a.k.a. Self-Proclaimed Power Man. And I'm here with my co-host and significant other, Rach.
Hey, guys.
Now, today we got a very interesting show. We're going to be talking about, we got Rev Lyle here again. And last time we talked about Buddhism. Today we're talking about Zoroastrianism. Now, I don't know much about Zoroastrianism, but what I do know is that it's one of the oldest religions known to man. And Rev Lyle is going to enlighten us about what this is and where this comes from and all that. So I can't wait to get started. Reverend Lyle, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Rachel.
Okay, so today we're talking about Zoroastrianism. So can you give us who still practices this and where exactly did this come from?
So it's actually an ancient Persian religion.
Okay.
So it's a little bit younger than Hinduism.
Okay.
It's about that same time frame. And Zoroaster was the prophet of Zoroastrianism.
Okay.
So and there's some I can get more into the detail of some of his past.
Okay, so we got Christianity, and we got, like you said, Hinduism. Where does Zoroastrianism? Is it before that? Is it after that? Is it between that?
It's actually like 3,500 years old.
Yeah.
Okay, so is that before Christianity?
That's before it had been Judaism.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So it is. It's as old probably as Hinduism. If Hinduism might be a little bit older.
Okay.
Yeah. But there's some speculation because there's not a lot written about it as far as whether the prophet actually lived. So that's very, very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you said it came from the prophet. What was the prophet's name again?
Zoroaster. And
Okay.
it was in what now is like modern day Iran.
Okay.
In the Persian Empire.
Okay. Well, most people know that that those countries are mostly Muslim countries.
Yeah.
So where does the Zoroastrianism fit in with that?
So are you wanting to more of the history, where it came from?
Well, yeah. I just I'm trying to figure. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's like okay, being a Westerner, we see Iran, we see stuff Iran in the news and stuff like that, and we know it's a Muslim country. Then all of a sudden, okay, where does that fit in?
So what happened was they were around Iran, Iraq area in the Persian Empire.
Okay.
And then they actually left there because of the Muslim influence. The Muslims, once they became popular and started traveling to different countries, they kicked them out of the Iran area of the Persian Empire.
Okay.
So they ended up going to India.
Okay.
And so now India is like the homeland of the Zoroastrian tradition.
Okay. And what's interesting with that too, because in India we got Zoroastrianism, we also got Muslim, and we also got Buddhism, which
Buddhism.
when we talked about Buddhism, I was like, and when I studied on Buddhism, I'm like, India. I thought it was mostly Asian countries.
Yeah, well, and India is not really the Indo-Asian area. There is the birthplace of all these different religions.
Mm-hmm.
So Hinduism, Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, Shintoism, Confucianism, Taoism, shamanism. So yeah, all these different religions had their roots there. So yeah.
Okay, so let's go back. So you said it was the prophet that came up with created this religion.
Well, what he did was he was the prophet for this god, and the god's name. I'm just trying to remember right off. It's Ahura Mazda. But what he said was, in the early days of this religion, actually they were polytheistic, meaning they had many, many different gods. However, this prophet got this message. He said Ahura Mazda said that they were the one true God above all the other gods. So you get into this idea of this movement from polytheism into monotheism, which happens with Judaism, which happens with a lot of different traditions at that time.
Okay, now you said, please, listeners, please forgive me if I can't pronounce these words. You said polyism and
polytheism. So more than one God, so many gods.
Okay.
Yeah, so poly meaning many, and then theism meaning God. So it started out as a polytheistic theology, and then it came down into this prophet got the message that there's one true God, and the other ones were false gods. So
okay,
yeah.
So they came across this, and then how did it come up with Zoroastrianism?
Well, so So Zarathustra, and it's actually a bastardized way of Zarathustra. You get to Zoroastrianism, right? So that's how that got started. So,
Okay, and then what are the practices of Zoroastrianism?
well, it's actually very, very interesting. So they have a strong belief in fire.
Okay,
So they have fire temples,
okay,
and then also so fire and water are both very sacred to them. And if that sounds familiar, it is, because it comes to us in the Christian tradition and all the other traditions as well, like Judaism, so on. So, so the use of fire, the use of water, and there were some other traditions that I thought I'd share with you that they have.
Well, just touching base on the fire and the water, I thought it was interesting that in Christianity, we're worried about the thought of fire, right? We create, that's more like the devil and stuff like that, the hellfire, right? And then water is more purity. We think of it, in Christianity as God, right?
Right.
And I thought it was very interesting when I was doing my research on this that I found that they don't worship the fire, but they come close to the fire to be close to their God.
Correct. Yep, that's true. So, so some of the other practices they have, what I found very interesting is their belief about life after death. So after the death of the body, the soul remains in this world for 3 days and nights. That sounds familiar from Christianity as well. And in the care of Zoroaster, one of the Yazdas or angels. So during this period, the prayers are said and rituals performed to assure the safe passage of the soul into the spiritual realm. So that all sounds very familiar to the Christian tradition.
Yes.
So
I also found it very interesting with the thought of death with them. They do not touch the body at all, ever.
Right. So you put it on a funeral fire, or you leave it for the vultures to eat the body.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the fire has to be made of, I did not research the 7 different substances that make this fire, but they do not believe in cremation, and they do not believe in our traditional, now in America, burial.
Correct. Yep. Yeah, so they put the body out on this platform, and let the vultures come, very much like you might find in Native American traditions, or even Hinduism, where you put it on a platform and then you burn the body. So
sure.
Yeah, something similar to that. So also what I found interesting is in the oldest Zoroastrian scriptures, heaven and hell are not places, as one we might think in Christianity, but states of mind. They result in the right or wrong choices. So, and that fits with a metaphysical understanding of heaven and hell as consciousness, not places. So, and one of the other things, I don't know if you found this interesting or not too, but the idea that God or Ahura Mazda, these people would go into the state of consciousness, and then at the end, this Messiah would come and save them and bring them back.
Sure. Yeah.
Very much like Christianity. So,
well, it kind of touches a little bit on Hinduism, because I know Hinduism, they think that the form comes back in cows. That's why they don't eat cows and stuff like that, because they think they're eating ancestors or something like that. They worship the cows.
Yeah. So and this predates Christianity. So there's the question about if Judaism and Christianity actually were influenced by Zoroastrianism, and there's some speculation that one of the forms of Buddhism, as well as Judaism and Christianity, were influenced by Zoroastrianism because they were in that area. So
the way I was explaining it to Cris earlier was a lot of religions that are younger are the way that people adapted them is saying, for instance, Esther, the god, right? They celebrate Esther right around the same time that they celebrate Easter, and that's how they link them together, because they wanted to bring more this is a different religion. They wanted to bring more paganism over to Christianity, so they found common grounds and said, the way you explain Esther is the way we explain Easter, and it was more, it was more, okay, we can follow that. We can follow your new religion.
Right, yeah. And actually, a little off the subject of Zoroastrianism is Mithraism. which was a Roman god, and his birth date was December 25th. He was worshipped by the Roman culture and Roman soldiers. So you see that in the early Christianity, they actually moved the birth of Jesus from the fall time, which would be in the Judaic tradition, to December 25th. So they had other things like that. So all these religions borrow and are influenced in some way to each other.
Well, that's one of the things with me is like I always say, I love history. I love looking back at things, and a lot of the holidays, and I'm not trying to scare the listeners out there, but a lot of the holidays that we celebrate actually come from pagan rituals.
Yes.
Yeah.
And including in this one, there's so many religions that celebrate something in December. It's the same with this religion, which celebrates in December 21st. And, that's more of the winter solstice, right?
Yeah.
And then also March 21st is their new year.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Well, that's the thing with the birth of Jesus, December 25th, as we know as Christmas, that actually came from a pagan holiday. But when you look at the things of Christmas, and Reverend, you've studied this more than I have, so please correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, it was a snowy, and they wound up in a manger, and that's where the Christ child was born. But okay, when you look at Jerusalem, there's no snow. So I've heard that it could have been a sandstorm, and that's what they were taking shelter from, the sandstorm, and then that's when the baby Jesus. But was he born in December, or was he born more in July?
Right. Yeah, and that's academically we think probably born more in July than December. So, but again, if you take a step back from these stories, so the importance of telling these stories is not for literalism, not for the sake of historically necessarily true. The stories are told for a reason.
Yeah.
And so you have to search for what that reason is. Why are they telling the story in this certain way? What is the outcome? What do they want you to learn?
Oh, but looking at Christmas, wasn't one of the kings that went to see the Christ child, wasn't he a Zoroastrian?
I believe all three were.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because they were into astrology, astronomy, those sciences, which was not common to Judaism or even some of the other faiths at the time. So Zoroastrianism definitely, yeah, if not also Egyptian influence there too. So.
Well, one time I was at school and I was talking to a girl when I went to Voltech over in Brooklyn Park, Minnesota. I was talking to a girl who was Jehovah's Witness, and I said, I'm not trying to knock your religion, but why don't you celebrate Christmas? And she said that when and correct me if I'm wrong, but she said that when the three wise men went to see the Christ child, that they were actually going there to kill him. I'm like, what? But I don't know if this is true or not. But
I think she got the story kind of messed up because I was studying to be Jehovah's Witness.
Okay.
For quite a few years.
Well, enlighten us.
Yeah.
So there's truth and there's false. Okay. And even in the Christian text, it says that these three kings were supposed to go back to the king and report the child's birth, right? So there's truth in that, okay? But where it's not truth is that they were going there to kill him. The truth why Jehovah's Witnesses, and we're going off subject, and we'll go back in just a second.
Yeah.
Is because there's 3 accounts in the Bible of birthdays, and each of them led with a prophet or somebody close to God being beheaded.
Oh.
Okay.
So there's no birthdays in the Bible or anything that has any ties to the Bible that has a celebration that's just purity.
Okay.
And Jesus never said, this is my birthday. This is where our confusion that we were just talking about is coming from, right? Was he born in July? Was he born in December? Where was he born? And the truth is that you just celebrate because they were bringing it to the truth of the people, and so that they would go forward with Christianity.
Yeah. Yep. That does make sense.
So what more can you tell us about Zoroastrianism?
Well, the very interesting thing, we were talking about this before the program here, is they don't proselytize. Also, when you're born into the tradition.
Yeah.
So for example, if I were to marry a woman and she already had children, if she was not Zoroastrianist member, I as one of those could be, and my children could be then. But if I married somebody outside and we had children, they would not be. They'd have to actually be born into the faith itself.
So yeah, they're considering it more of a dying religion because there's only 200 left. You know, there a lot of people are searching outside their religion to be married because there's only so many people in it. You know, and you know what's our culture these days? You know, believe in what you believe, right? So I mean, it will be interesting to find out in 1,000 years what religions are actually surviving and which ones are going.
Right, that's right. And one of the most famous Zoroastrianists that we might know as Westerners is Freddie Mercury.
Okay.
Freddie Mercury was born in the Zoroastrianism tradition.
And Freddie Mercury, for those who don't know, was the lead singer of the rock group Queen.
Yeah.
Queen.
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 So yeah, and so there are many leaders in like India. Where that's kind of the center now of Zoroastrianism, northern India. So there's a lot of leaders out of India and other countries in that area that are Zoroastrianists. So
another thing that I found interesting of why the religion could be dying is because they don't go to church every Sunday. They don't go to their synagogue every Sunday. They do most of their prayer work in the home.
Right.
And then on the 21st, or what they consider bar mitzvahs and stuff like that, or on March 21st, when they come together, that's their celebration together.
Right. Yep. Yeah, it's not a Sunday service kind of church environment. Yeah. So yeah, and one thing that I would love to actually do more research on is they actually do have this idea of angels and also the good and the bad. You know, so there's one angel that's pointing to the good, another angel pointing to the bad.
Yes, I found that very interesting also. And I wanted to do some more research on it also because I'm like, is it more related with the 7 deadly sins and 7 heavenly virtues, right? Is that why they have 7 of those angels and demons that are following their I do not remember the devil, the name they have for devil.
I don't remember that right offhand. So,
but they do believe in a devil and they do believe in God. And another thing that they strongly believe in with their money and their time is being really good with charities.
Right.
You know, they link that very high with being a very good person.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I just remembered with that. So the Spenta Mainu is the holy or bountiful spirit, and Angra Mainu is the destructive or opposing spirit. So
yeah, I thought it was very interesting that they had 7 angels and 7, you know.
Yeah.
I would find it very interesting to find more about, you know, are they tied to those virtues and, you know.
Well, coming off of what you just said, that they give money to charity and all that, that sounds a lot like Christianity. Like if you do good for others, you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it seems like a little bit was taken from that from Christianity. You know, our Christianity took a little bit from that.
Well, and also with the Muslim culture and also with Judaism. It's the same thing. Yeah. Very much connected to, and also somewhat you go into Confucianism, the parent-child, the ruler-servant roles. There's a lot on relationship. And so the idea of giving back to the community is about being interrelated. You know, we're not separate. We're not in the Western culture. We're very much about individualism, and this is totally about a collective consciousness.
Well, when you were talking about fire and water, all of a sudden the first thing that came to my mind was Taoism. You know, because you know you got the yin and the yang, you got the hard and the soft. So fire can burn, but then water can take out fire. So that's the first thing is like Taoism. You know?
And in my studies, that's what I was finding a lot of Taoism was happening.
Yeah. And so a lot of these, I think they influenced each other in different ways as we go through the history. Yeah.
And that's the thing too, because when you actually look at religion, because some people are their parents were, and I'm not picking on the Catholic religion or the Christian religion, but my parents were Christian, so I grew up Christian, and this is, but when you actually start to look outside of it and start to look at these different religions, you start to say, hey, this stuff kind of intertwines,
Yes.
Oh yeah.
A little bit was taken from there to create this, and a little bit was taken,
Yeah. So there are some moral practices in Zoroastrianism that I wanted just to mention.
Okay.
Humata, which are good thoughts, the intention or moral resolution to abide by asha, the right order of things, hukata, good words, the communication of that intention, and then havarashta, good deeds, the realization and action of that intention. So those three, and that's what we're talking about, good thoughts, good words, good deeds.
Yes.
And that sounds very familiar again to a lot of these other traditions as well.
Mm-hmm. So you said something about the seven what?
Oh, so the 7 angels.
Yes, the 7 angels. So
Do you happen to know the name of the 7 angels, or?
Here's something that a lot of people need to understand. Right around the time, now I'm not going to remember what ruler came over, but what happened is they had a temple, okay, over in Persia, and now was it Alexander the Great, or was it Julius Caesar? I think it was Alexander.
Alexander.
Okay,
Yeah.
He had burned the temple. Now on this temple, on top of the temple is where they would put their people that had died, and that's where the vultures would come and stuff like that. A cool fact is that since that temple has gone, the birds have pretty much died off because that's where they were getting their substance. But also inside the temple was a lot of their written writings. So we're never going to know the full extent of how much more we're actually missing.
Yeah.
Right. And in all my studies, I was not able to answer your question because, hopefully, one day I'll be able to have that conversation with one of the people that are actually this religion. But right now in all my studies, I have not been able to find that answer.
Yeah. Yeah. So some of the ideas here, the 7 mighty intelligences are also guardians of various kingdoms of nature. So you have Ahura Mazda himself, just the one wise Lord. You have Vohu Mana, the good mind, that's divine wisdom. You have Asha, I always get this wrong, Vahisha, the highest truth, that is like righteousness. And then Kristrathra Vara, which is desirable dominion, is divine strength and the power of Mazda's kingdom. And then you have Spenta Armati, holy or bountiful devotion. So you can kind of see these are not only consciousness and intelligence, but a way of living. And then you have I always pronounce this one wrong too. It's wholeness, Harvatat, and then Emeritat, which is immortality, the state of immortal bliss, in association with the plant kingdom. So these different intelligences have place in nature and a relationship to nature.
So looking at this, we've talked with Reverend Lyle before. Now, Reverend Lyle, we're going to go back. He's a New Thought practitioner, and he's also studied these different religions because he was studying them for. What were you studying for?
I'm in a world religions class.
Okay.
So, I was studying all these different religions.
Okay.
But at one time you were studying to be a priest also, yes?
Oh, yeah. So I was Roman Catholic when I was younger, almost a priest, and then I dropped out. So.
Yeah, he dropped out. And then now he's a. Is it safe to say New Thought practitioner?
Yeah. Yep.
And then if you ever look at New Thought, New Thought is a religion where we kind of take kind of like what we're talking about now. We take a little bit from everything because the guy who created it, Ernest Holmes, he was also studying to be a priest, and he dropped out, and he found out that all these religions kind of coincide with each other, and he started New Thought, and he started a New Thought church back in 1926.
He wrote the Science of Mind book.
Yeah.
So, but even before him, there were people, and this is very interesting about the background of New Thought. It comes up from people throughout, like Plato, these concepts, and Origen, a bishop of the church.
Yeah, Ralph Waldo Emerson was
Ralph Waldo Emerson, Meister Eckhart. There's a lot of people that had these ideas, and Ernest Holmes was one of those people that put together some of these thoughts into a book and a philosophy of life that he then started a church.
And then now with Zoroastrianism, this is what was say BC? What it was 6,000.
Well,
No, it was even before BC.
Yeah,
It's 3,000. We're 2,000.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is what I found fascinating too. They don't exactly know. Is there speculation? It was like 3,000 BC.
Okay.
Between 3,000 and 5,000, which Hinduism is considered to be about that same time, 3,000 and 5,000 BC. But some people put Zoroaster at 600 BC.
Okay, now when we say 600 BC, a lot of people don't understand what BC is. BC means before Christ, and Christ was
Well, he's the Christian Messiah.
yeah. Well, but I mean in BC terms, Christ.
Oh, what year?
Yeah,
35.
35 BC,
35.
and then when he died, we come up to AD, and then after death of Christ.
Yeah, and it's actually
Actually, BC really isn't like before Christ. A lot of people think about that. Christ was born at 35 BC.
Okay.
So, yeah. And the thing really cool about time is that before BC, AC always rolls down, right? And then BC starts rolling up.
Okay.
So
What AC? What's AC?
well, AD. You mean
AD.
Yeah.
So another way of thinking about it, actually, it comes from the Judaic tradition, is BCE, before the Common Era. So that's how a lot of the academic books. So before the Common Era, BCE, and then after the Common Era would be ACE. So or CE, Common Era.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, see, back in 5th grade, we were studying about cavemen. I was like, "What's BC?" They're like, "Before Christ." I'm like, "What's AD?" After death. I'm like, "After death of who?" And they're like, "After death of Christ." I'm like, "Okay." So,
and actually, AD would be Latin, so Anno Domini, which means the year of the Lord.
Okay.
In Latin, so it would be after they consider the birth of Jesus Christ would be then after the birth of Jesus. So.
And one of the things about Zoroastrianism too is a lot of these and got to bring this, a lot of those people that, especially in Persian stuff like that, a lot of them mixed with also African descent, so a lot of them were dark-skinned people.
Yeah, and some of the culture too, like a lot of them would be vegetarian. Again, they are encouraged not to marry outside of their own faith. You're born a Zoroastrianist member. But yeah, so there's a lot of those cultural and familial practices that they really hold dear. So tradition and ritual are very, very dear. So
when you talk about like you got to be born into that, you know, if you marry outside it and all that. But I find that with a lot of religions today, like, you know, if your mom's Christian, she wants you to marry a Christian girl, or if your mom's Catholic, she wants you to marry a Catholic girl.
The evening of the yoke.
Yeah.
Yep.
Or if you're Jewish, she wants you to marry a Jewish girl.
Yep.
And I kind of find that because they want to keep the religion going, you know.
Yeah, and they have an idea of what it means for that religion to be pure, right? In that sense. So, and for example, growing up Catholic. If let's say I were to marry a woman who is Lutheran, she would have to promise to raise the kids Catholic.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's that idea of that purity of that you would maintain those children as members of the church.
And I find that like I said, I find that to keep, you know, because they want to keep the religion going, you know.
Yeah.
But, you know, people that are really based in their faith, you know, you have this strong belief, you have centuries of your generations, celebrating this. Then you bring in a completely different religion, not just like Lutheran, but, we're Christian, we're Catholic, and then we bring in Judaism. They're completely different holidays and everything, right? Now this is a whole new mind frame that you have to learn so that you're not insulting this other person, right? So that you're giving power to the person you love, So there's a reason for the reason, the evening of the yoke. But in truth, if you're following your heart, you're going to be more open to whatever religion is out there, and that's kind of why I wanted to go forward in, this whole thing, saying, your religion is great, but look at its ancestry, right? Yeah. Look at its truth. It's not so far away from somebody else's religion.
Yeah. Well, when I look at and my mind works really weird, but when I look at marrying outside the faith, that always reminds me of and I didn't see the play, I saw the movie Fiddler on the Roof. Oh, yes. When he had one daughter that he had an arranged marriage for, and she wanted to marry the tailor, so he accepted that. Yeah, you can marry this guy. But then the one daughter wanted to marry out the faith. He accepted everything, but married out the faith, no way.
Yep.
And one thing I love, going into New Thought, one thing I love about New Thought, and I don't know if I'd mentioned this last time, but if you consider a mountain with many different paths, right, and some of those are very well-worn paths. So one might be Buddhism, another Hinduism, another one might be Judaism or Zoroastrianism. But there's also other paths that people have started that might be like Ralph Waldo Emerson, and a few people, trekked through the flowers there and started a small path, but also there might be no path at all. And so in New Thought, we say all of these lead to the one at the very top of the mountain. And so it does not matter whether you're on trudging through the flowers or on a path, it's all one source.
Yes.
And so one thing I like to say with that is, if you consider not looking at the paths as to choose which one's right or wrong, but to consider the mountain itself as the path. Sure. So no matter where you are on that mountain, you're on that path.
Yeah, well, and that's interesting. You should bring that up, because one day I was talking to local celebrity out here. It's also a friend of mine, Fancy Ray McCloney, and he told me to look at this video on YouTube with Muhammad Ali. Now, we know Muhammad Ali was born in Cassius Clay, and he converted to Islam. And it was a big uprising, like, this guy's converting to Islam, and Muhammad Ali went forward with, this is who I am, this is my name. Yep. You don't like it. And he was doing an interview on a show, and it's on YouTube, and he said, all these paths lead to God. He said, I happen to chose Islam. He goes, you got to choose what's right for you and what's, Yep. And I remember I was going to church at the time. I didn't have a car, so I was on the bus, and this guy's trying to talk to me about it. I was like, well, all paths lead to God. He's like, well, wonder if this path led all over. I said, it can go this way, that way, and all that. But sooner or later, you're going to get there, So you got to choose what's right for you. I go, Christianity works right for you. I'm New Thought. That works right for me, Yep. And he's like, will you take my path? I said, I'm not interested in your path. Not that I'm, against Christianity. And I said, but this is the path I chose,
Yes.
And, you should respect however path you do choose, you should respect that,
Yep.
Yeah. And one thing, as you were talking, reminded me of something too, is we have different words for our traditions and words and concepts for our faith traditions. And I can listen to, as a minister, I can listen to somebody talk, and they could be evangelical or Catholic or Jewish or Muslim or even Zoroastrian in their faith tradition. And I can find that commonality, but I find that the words will mean certain things for different people. So exactly. I can hear with the ears of my heart what they're saying, and I can understand that concept. So let's say, for example, somebody says, Jesus is my personal savior. I can say yes. And they say, do you believe that too? And I could say yes. I might not use those exact same words, but I understand that Christ's presence within me, a new thought.
Yeah.
So I can say yes to that. So.
Well, Reverend Lyle, this has been fun. We could probably go on for another hour.
Well, we'll be bringing him back for another religion talk.
Yeah. These have actually been these religious talks have actually been interesting and also been very, very educational. It's good to when you open your mind and when you look at other things, it's really, really powerful, and it's really interesting to look at this. And if you want to get a hold of Reverend Lyle, you got some if you got questions or if you want a prayer, and I think he does. You do Zoom chats, or
I don't know how to do Zoom. I'm still learning.
Okay.
Technology is a new language.
But they can email you, or
and it's simply Lyleschlundt@gmail.com.
Lyleschlundt,
Lyleschlundt.
All right, SCHLUN.
That'll be in the show notes.
Yeah.
They'll be in the show notes. So if you got any questions, or if you want to chat with Reverend Lyle, or if you want him to say a prayer, he does prayer work. What else do you do?
Well, I currently I'm actually taking care of myself and my parents. We're all survivors of cancer right now.
Okay.
So I'm grateful for that. So I'm taking some classes and doing things here and there with people and for people. So
Okay.
yeah.
So email him on Lyleschlundt.com.
Yeah, Lyleschlundt@gmail.com.
Lyleschlundt@gmail.com. And like I said, this has been interesting. Can't wait to have you back to talk about another religion and have another conversation. Like I said, these conversations can just go on forever because I find them really interesting. But it's only a 30-minute show. We are a little bit over, but hey, we learned something. So, and I'll let Rach close us out.
All right, you guys. On History is born on layers of hate. On Here, we're trying to build lines of love, even when finding your true path. Appreciate everyone and have a great one.
Take it easy.